The gunshot echoed across the rolling prairie as Sheriff Nathan Prescott fell dead, his body crumpling to the dust of Leavenworth's Main Street. Sarah Blackwell stood frozen on the boardwalk, parasol clutched in trembling hands, witnessing the moment her Kansas hometown descended into lawlessness. The year was 1876, and the West had just gotten wilder. "You'll be needin' a new sheriff now," drawled the gunman, holstering his weapon before mounting his horse and disappearing into the vast Kansas landscape, leaving the townsfolk in stunned silence. 3 weeks later, Naomi Zeller stepped off the stagecoach, dust swirling around her skirts as her boots touched Leavenworth soil for the first time. At 26, she carried herself with the poise of someone who'd seen more of life than most women her age. Her chestnut hair was pinned neatly beneath a practical bonnet, and her traveling dress, though well-made, spoke of functionality rather than fashion. "Miss Zeller," a portly man with a sweating brow approached, hat in hand. "Mayor Whitfield, we've been expecting you." Naomi nodded, surveying the town with sharp eyes. "I received your letter about my uncle's death. I'm sorry I couldn't arrive sooner." "We're grateful you came at all. Sheriff Prescott spoke highly of you." The mayor mopped his forehead. "Your uncle's house is prepared for you, though I must warn you the town has changed since his passing." "So I've heard." Naomi retrieved her trunk from the stagecoach. "I understand his murderer remains at large." The mayor's expression darkened. "Jeb Harlow, nasty piece of work." "But that's not your concern, Miss Zeller. A lady shouldn't. My uncle raised me after my parents died in the cholera outbreak of '58, Naomi interrupted. "He taught me many things, Mayor Whitfield, including how to manage my own concerns." The mayor cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Of course." "Well, I'll have someone show you to your new home." As Naomi followed a young boy carrying her trunk, she absorbed the details of Leavenworth. The town had grown since her uncle's letters had described it. A proper bank stood at one end of the main street, a schoolhouse at the other. Between them lay the usual establishments: the general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and various shops. What caught her attention most, however, was the absence of a star on any man's chest. No one had replaced her uncle as sheriff. Uncle Nathan's house sat on the edge of town, a modest but sturdy structure with a small garden out back. Inside, Naomi found everything meticulously organized her uncle's way. She ran her fingers along his desk, pausing at the silver star that lay there, removed from the body before burial. That night, after settling in, Naomi lit a lamp and pulled out her uncle's journal, reading through his final entries. Names leapt from the pages. Jeb Harlow, the murderer; Samuel Stone, a rancher with a reputation for being as untamed as the mustangs he raised; various townsfolk and their minor complaints and infractions. A knock at the door startled her. Hand moving instinctively to the small derringer hidden in her pocket, another of Uncle Nathan's lessons, Naomi approached cautiously. "Who's there?" she called. "Samuel Stone, madam. Just checking that you're settling in all right." Naomi opened the door to find a man in his early 30s standing on her porch, hat in hand. He was tall and lean, with features hardened by sun and wind. His dark hair was longer than town fashion dictated, and his eyes, a startling blue against his tanned skin, held her gaze steadily. "Mr. Stone." Naomi remembered the name from her uncle's journal. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "No, madam. I was at the stagecoach earlier, saw you arrive." He shifted his weight. "Your uncle was a good man. He helped me when I first came to these parts." "Thought I should return the favor by checking on his niece." "That's kind of you, but unnecessary. I can manage." A slight smile curved his lips. "I don't doubt that, Miss Zeller. Nathan spoke of you often, said you had more spine than most men he knew." Despite herself, Naomi felt a flicker of warmth at the thought of her uncle's pride. "Did you come to warn me about Jeb Harlow as well?" Samuel's expression darkened. "Harlow's dangerous. He's been terrorizing the smaller homesteads south of town. Mayor's too afraid to appoint a new sheriff." "And the men of Leavenworth, are they all too afraid as well?" Some are, others just don't have the skills. He studied her with those piercing eyes. What are your plans, Miss Zeller, staying in Leavenworth? For now, I need to settle my uncle's affairs. She hesitated. Mr. Stone, did you witness my uncle's murder? He shook his head. I was breaking horses at my ranch, but I rode in as soon as I heard. By then, Harlow was long gone. Naomi nodded, processing this information. Well, thank you for your concern, Mr. Stone, but it's getting late. Of course. He placed his hat back on his head. My ranch is about 5 miles west of town, the Stone Quarter Circle. If you need anything, send word. After he left, Naomi returned to her uncle's journal, finding multiple entries mentioning Samuel Stone. According to Nathan, Stone had arrived 3 years prior, purchased land outside town, and established himself as a capable rancher and horse trainer. He specialized in breaking wild Mustangs' horses, most considered too untamable for practical use. Stubborn as the day is long, her uncle had written, but honest to a fault. Reminds me of those Mustangs. He tames wild spirit, but true once you earn his trust. The next morning, Naomi dressed in a practical day dress and headed into town. She needed to meet with the bank manager about her uncle's accounts and visit the general store for supplies. As she walked, she noted the curious glances from townsfolk. A new face was always cause for interest in small communities. Inside the bank, Mr. Holbrook, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, expressed his condolences before explaining her uncle's finances. Sheriff Prescott was prudent with his money, Miss Zeller. You'll find yourself comfortably provided for should you choose to remain in Leavenworth. Thank you, Mr. Holbrook. Has anyone inquired about the sheriff position since my uncle's passing? The banker's expression grew guarded. The mayor has approached several candidates, none have accepted. Because of Jeb Harlow, partially. Harlow has friends dangerous men. And without proper law enforcement. He trailed off, adjusting his spectacles nervously. After concluding her business at the bank, Naomi crossed to the general store. Inside, she found a woman about her own age arranging dry goods on a shelf. You must be Sheriff Prescott's niece, the woman said, smiling warmly. I'm Alina Walsh. My husband Daniel and I run the store, Naomi Zeller. She returned the smile, grateful for the friendly face. I need to stock my uncle's pantry. It seems he lived primarily on coffee and bacon. Alina laughed. That sounds like the sheriff. He took most of his meals at the hotel dining room. She began gathering items as Naomi listed them. Will you be staying long in Leavenworth? I'm not certain yet. Naomi examined a bolt of calico. The town seems unsettled since my uncle's death. Alina's voice lowered. It is. Jeb Harlow rode through again yesterday, took supplies without paying. Nobody dared stop him. She glanced around before continuing. Samuel Stone confronted him once about a month ago, nearly got himself killed. Mr. Stone seems capable of handling himself. Oh, he is, one of the few who might stand up to Harlow, but even Samuel can't face Harlow's whole gang alone. Alina sighed. We need a sheriff, but who would take the job now? As Naomi left the general store, arms laden with packages, she nearly collided with a man exiting the saloon across the street. He steadied her with hands that smelled of whiskey and tobacco. Well now, what have we here? His voice was a dangerous drawl. New in town, ain't you, pretty lady? Naomi stepped back, taking in the man's unshaven face and bloodshot eyes. Excuse me. No need to rush off. He blocked her path. Name's Charlie Watts. I ride with Jeb Harlow. Maybe you've heard of us. His smile revealed yellowed teeth. I've heard enough to know I should continue on my way, Mr. Watts. Naomi attempted to step around him, but he shifted to block her again. That ain't friendly. We're just talking, the lady said. Excuse me. Samuel Stone's voice cut through the tension. He stood a few paces away, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard as flint. Watts sneered. This ain't your business, Stone. I'm making it my business. Samuel's hand rested casually near his holstered revolver. Miss Zeller is new to town. Wouldn't want her thinking we lack manners in Leavenworth. For a moment, Naomi thought Watts might challenge Samuel, but after a tense silence, the man spat on the ground and stalked away, muttering curses. "Are you all right?" Samuel asked, approaching Naomi, perfectly fine. "Though I appreciate your intervention." She adjusted her packages. "I take it that was one of Harlow's men," Samuel nodded, taking some of her parcels despite her protest. "Charlie Watts, not the brightest but mean as a rattlesnake. Harlow keeps him around for muscle, not brains. And yet he walks freely through town." Naomi couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "That's what happens when there's no law." Samuel fell into step beside her. "Mayor's too scared to pin on the star and the county marshal is dealing with troubles in Topeka." They walked in silence for a few moments before Naomi asked, "Tell me about your ranch, Mr. Stone. My uncle mentioned your work with Mustangs." Samuel's face brightened. "Best horses in Kansas once they're properly trained. Most folks won't touch them, say they're too wild, too unpredictable. But they're just misunderstood. What makes you able to tame them when others cannot? Patience, respect." He glanced at her. "Understanding that you can't force a wild thing to submit, you have to earn its trust." After a pause, he added, "Would you like to see them? The Mustangs, I mean." "I'm heading back to my ranch this afternoon." Naomi hesitated, weighing propriety against curiosity. "I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition. I've got a new group just brought in from the hills, 7 of them, still getting used to corrals after a lifetime of freedom." Something in his voice, pride mixed with genuine passion, made her decision. "Very well, Mr. Stone. I'd like to see these untamable horses of yours." After depositing her purchases at home, Naomi changed into her riding clothes, a divided skirt that had scandalized her finishing school teachers, but proved practical for the long rides she'd taken with her uncle during summer visits. Samuel arrived with 2 horses, his own mount, a powerful bay stallion and a gentle dun mare for Naomi. As they rode west from town, the landscape opened before them, the vastness of the prairie broken only by occasional stands of cottonwoods marking creek beds. "It's beautiful," Naomi remarked, breathing in the clean air scented with grass and sage, "different from back east." "Very. I've lived in Philadelphia since my uncle sent me to school there at 14. Everything there feels confined." Samuel nodded, understanding. "That's why I came west." "Too many fences in Tennessee." They rode in comfortable silence until Samuel's ranch came into view, a modest but well-maintained collection of buildings nestled in a shallow valley. Beyond the main house stood several corrals, including one larger enclosure where Naomi could see horses moving restlessly. "There they are," Samuel said, pride evident in his voice. "My newest challenge." As they approached, Naomi studied the Mustangs, smaller than domesticated horses, with alert eyes and a wariness in their movements that spoke of their wild nature. They varied in color from dun to bay to pinto, each bearing the distinctive markings of horses that had evolved to survive the harsh prairie conditions. One in particular caught her attention, a spirited black mare who paced the fence line, tossing her head defiantly whenever anyone approached. "That one doesn't seem interested in being tamed," Naomi observed as they dismounted near the corral. "She's the leader. Has to show the others she won't give in easily." Samuel leaned against the fence. "But she's also the smartest. Once she decides to trust you, the others will follow." "How long will it take? Could be weeks, could be months," he shrugged. "You can't rush these things. Yet people pay you to break them quickly." Samuel turned to face her, his expression serious. "I don't break horses, Miss Zeller." "That's what most men do, break their spirit until they're too defeated to resist. I form partnerships with them." Naomi studied him, seeing beyond the rugged exterior to the philosophy that guided him. A rare approach in a place where domination seems to be the preferred method. Maybe. He smiled slightly. "But I've yet to meet the horse that responds better to fear than to respect." As they walked around the property, Samuel showed her the barn, the small bunkhouse where his 2 ranch hands stayed, and the main house, a simple but comfortable structure with a wide porch overlooking the valley. "It's not much," he said, almost apologetically, "but it's mine." "It's lovely," Naomi replied sincerely. "You've built something meaningful here." Over coffee on the porch, they watched the sunset paint the Kansas sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Samuel spoke of his journey west after the war, of starting with nothing but determination and a knack for understanding horses that even he couldn't fully explain. Naomi found herself sharing stories of her life in Philadelphia, the constraints of society, her work teaching at a girls' school, her relief at escaping the city each summer to visit her uncle. "He wanted me to move here permanently," she admitted. "Said Philadelphia was making me forget how to breathe properly." Was he right? Naomi considered the question, watching the last light fade from the sky. "Perhaps. I've felt more alive in these 2 days than in months back east." As twilight deepened, Samuel reluctantly suggested they return to town. "It'll be full dark soon, not safe to ride these trails at night." The ride back was quiet, both lost in their thoughts. At the edge of town, Naomi finally asked the question that had been forming in her mind. "Mr. Stone, why hasn't anyone challenged Jeb Harlow? Surely the men of Leavenworth together could stand against him." Samuel's expression grew somber in the fading light. "Fear is powerful, Miss Zeller. Harlow killed your uncle in broad daylight in front of witnesses. No one moved to stop him." He paused, "And Harlow has at least 6 men riding with him now. My uncle faced worse odds during his time as a marshal in Missouri. Your uncle was a rare breed." Samuel's voice softened. "Like those Mustangs, wild in his own way, but with a core of steel most men lack." At her door, Samuel helped her dismount, his hands lingering momentarily at her waist. "Thank you for coming today. Not many would take interest in wild horses." Naomi smiled. "Perhaps I see something of myself in them, not quite fitting the mold others have designed." Their eyes met, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Then Samuel stepped back, tipping his hat. "Good night, Miss Zeller. Good night, Mr. Stone." Inside, Naomi lit the lamps and moved to her uncle's desk, where the silver star still lay. Picking it up, she felt its weight, physical and symbolic. She thought of the town without leadership, of Jeb Harlow's men walking freely down the main street, of the fear in Alina Walsh's eyes. She thought, too, of Samuel Stone and his Mustangs, wild but valuable, needing not subjugation but understanding. In the morning, Naomi dressed with care before walking purposefully to the mayor's office. Mayor Whitfield looked up in surprise when she entered without knocking. "Miss Zeller." "What can I do for you this fine morning?" Naomi placed her uncle's star on his desk. "I want to discuss the vacant sheriff position." The mayor blinked rapidly. That is, we're still considering candidates, of course, but these things take time. 3 weeks is sufficient time, Mayor Whitfield." "Meanwhile, Jeb Harlow's men intimidate your townsfolk and steal from your businesses. It's a difficult situation, one that requires immediate action." Naomi fixed him with a steady gaze. "My uncle trained me in law enforcement since I was a child. I can read and write, keep accurate records, and I'm familiar with legal procedures." The mayor's mouth opened and closed several times. "Miss Zeller, surely you're not suggesting you're a woman." "I'm aware of that fact, Mayor. I'm also aware that no man in Leavenworth has stepped forward to take this responsibility. But it's unheard of, a female sheriff. The town would be laughed out of Kansas. I believe they'd prefer laughter to living under Harlow's shadow." Naomi remained standing, her posture unyielding. "Unless you have another candidate prepared to pin on that star today," the mayor's shoulders sagged. "Miss Zeller, even if I considered such an irregular appointment, which I am not saying I would, Jeb Harlow would see it as a personal insult. He'd come gunning for you immediately." "Let me worry about Jeb Harlow. I cannot in good conscience put a lady in such danger." "Then appoint me temporarily," Naomi countered. "Until the county marshal can send a replacement. At least Leavenworth would have some semblance of law in the meantime." Mayor Whitfield stared at her, clearly weighing his limited options. After a long silence, he sighed deeply. 2 weeks. I'll appoint you as acting sheriff for 2 weeks while I write to the governor for assistance, but you must understand this is highly irregular. So is allowing a murderer to terrorize your town. Naomi picked up the star. I'll need access to my uncle's office and any deputies he employed. He had one deputy, James Cooper. Young fellow, ran off after Nathan was killed. The mayor fumbled with his keys. The office is just as your uncle left it. Pinning her uncle's star to her dress, Naomi nodded. Thank you, Mayor Whitfield. I'll begin immediately. The sheriff's office was a small building next to the jail, dusty from 3 weeks of neglect. Naomi opened windows to air it out, then began examining the wanted posters and case files her uncle had meticulously maintained. She found Jeb Harlow's file quickly wanted in 3 states for robbery and murder. According to her uncle's notes, Harlow had drifted into the area about 6 months ago and gradually assembled a gang of outlaws who preyed on isolated homesteads and travelers. The door opened, and Naomi looked up to see Samuel Stone standing in the threshold, his expression one of disbelief as he took in the star on her dress. "Please tell me this is some kind of joke," he said. "Good morning, Mr. Stone. No joke, just a temporary solution to Leavenworth's problem." "Are you out of your mind?" He closed the door behind him. "Harlow will come for you the minute he hears." "Probably." Naomi continued sorting through the papers. "Which is why I need to act quickly. Do you know where his camp is?" Samuel ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "This is suicide, Naomi." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and despite the tension, she felt a small thrill at the intimacy. "I'm not planning to confront him alone, Mr. Stone. I'm not a fool." "Then what exactly are you planning to restore order to Leavenworth?" "To find men willing to stand up to bullies rather than cower before them." She met his gaze directly. "To finish what my uncle started, and get yourself killed in the process." "That's not my intention." She softened her tone. "Samuel, this town needs leadership. If not me, then who? You." He looked away. "I'm not a lawman. Neither was my uncle originally. He was a schoolteacher who pinned on a star when no one else would." She stood, approaching him. "I need information about Harlow's camp. Will you help me or not?" Samuel stared at her for a long moment, conflict evident in his eyes. "Last I heard, they were camped in the old Wilkins cabin about 10 miles south, but that was a week ago. They move around." "Thank you." She returned to the desk. "I'd also like to know who in town might be willing to form a posse when the time comes." "A posse?" He laughed without humor. "You might find 2, maybe 3 men with enough backbone. Then 2 or 3 will have to do." She looked up at him. "Will you be one of them?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Finally, Samuel sighed. "You're as stubborn as those Mustangs." "Is that a yes?" "It's an I'll think about it." He moved toward the door. "In the meantime, be careful. Harlow has eyes in town." After Samuel left, Naomi continued organizing the office, creating a plan of action. By midday, word of her appointment had spread through Leavenworth, bringing curious onlookers to the office window and a few brave souls inside with complaints ranging from stolen chickens to boundary disputes. Eleanor Walsh arrived with a basket of food. "Thought you might be too busy to eat," she said, setting it on the desk. "Is it true? You're really our new sheriff?" "Acting sheriff," Naomi corrected. "Just until proper help arrives." Eleanor shook her head in wonder. "I don't know whether to call you brave or foolish, but I'm glad someone's finally doing something." She lowered her voice. "Daniel wants to help if you need it. He's not much with a gun, but he's steady." "Thank you, Eleanor. I may take him up on that offer." By evening, Naomi had assembled a rough map of Harlow's known movements, interviewed several victims of his gang's raids, and drafted telegrams to neighboring sheriffs requesting information. She was locking up the office when a rider approached from the south road, his horse lathered with sweat from hard riding. The man, a weathered farmer she'd met briefly at the general store, dismounted hastily. "Sheriff, or whatever I should call you, Harlow's men hit the Peterson place. Burned the barn, stole livestock. Peterson's hurt bad." "Where?" Naomi demanded. "About 7 miles south. His wife's tending to him, but they took everything, even their wagon. Get Dr. Morris out there immediately, and find Samuel Stone. Tell him I need him at my office now." As the farmer hurried away, Naomi re-entered the office, retrieving her uncle's rifle from behind the desk and checking the ammunition. She was loading her revolver when Samuel arrived, his expression grim. "You heard?" "Yes." He carried his own rifle and wore a gun belt. "You're not riding out there tonight. The Petersons need help, and they'll get it at first light." Samuel blocked the doorway. "Riding into unknown territory after dark is exactly what Harlow would want. It could be a trap." Naomi knew he was right, but the thought of waiting while the Petersons suffered galled her. "First thing tomorrow, then, I'll need you to guide me to their homestead." "I'll do better than that. I'll have 3 men ready to ride with us by sunrise." Surprised, she asked, "Who?" "Daniel Walsh for one, and 2 of my hands, both former cavalry. They can handle themselves." "Thank you." The relief in her voice was evident. Samuel's expression softened. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." But rest proved elusive that night as Naomi paced her uncle's house, going over her plans, checking and rechecking her weapons. She wondered if this was how Nathan had felt before confrontations, this strange mixture of fear and determination. Morning came too quickly and not soon enough. Naomi, dressed in her riding clothes, pinned the star to her vest and strapped on her uncle's gun belt. The weight of the revolver felt both foreign and familiar against her hip. Samuel was waiting outside with 4 mounted men: Daniel Walsh, his 2 ranch hands, and to her surprise, Mr. Holbrook from the bank, looking decidedly uncomfortable on horseback but determined nonetheless. "Mr. Holbrook." Naomi nodded greeting as she mounted her horse. "I didn't expect to see you here. The Petersons have banked with me for 15 years, Sheriff Zeller." He adjusted his spectacles nervously. "I may not be much in a fight, but I can bear witness to Harlow's crimes for the territorial judge." The 6-mile ride to the Peterson homestead was tense, each rider watchful for signs of ambush. What they found when they arrived was heartbreaking: a charred barn, empty corrals, and a small cabin where Mrs. Peterson greeted them with red-rimmed eyes. "They came just before sundown," she explained as Dr. Morris tended to her husband inside. 6 of them, led by Harlow himself, said we owed protection money for using the creek that runs through his land. Her voice broke. "When John refused, they beat him, took our livestock, and set fire to the barn." "Did they say where they were headed?" Samuel asked gently. Harlow mentioned something about paying a visit to Leavenworth, said it was time the town learned who was really in charge. Naomi and Samuel exchanged alarmed glances. "We need to get back," Naomi said. "Now." They rode hard, leaving Dr. Morris and Mr. Holbrook to help the Petersons. As they crested the final hill overlooking Leavenworth, they saw smoke rising from the south end of town. "The livery stable," Daniel said grimly. "They're burning it." Samuel's face hardened. "They'll hit the bank next. It's their pattern." Naomi assessed the situation quickly. "We'll approach from different directions. Samuel, take your men around to the east. Daniel and I will come in from the west. Don't engage until we're all in position." As they separated, Samuel caught Naomi's arm. "Be careful," he said, his eyes intense with unspoken emotion. "You too," she replied softly. Naomi and Daniel rode wide around the town, approaching from the cemetery side. They dismounted at the church, tethering their horses before proceeding on foot. From their position, they could see the chaos in the main street. Harlow's men had indeed moved on to the bank, while townspeople either fled or huddled in doorways. Jeb Harlow himself stood in the center of the street, a tall figure in a black duster, shouting orders to his men as they loaded bags from the bank onto stolen horses. "Where's Stone?" Daniel whispered. Naomi scanned the buildings opposite until she spotted movement on the hotel balcony. Samuel and one of his hands, rifles ready. The other ranch hand was positioned behind the water trough near the saloon. "On my signal," Naomi murmured, raising her rifle. Before she could fire, however, Charlie Watts emerged from the general store, dragging Eleanor Walsh by the arm. The woman's face was bruised, her dress torn at the shoulder. Daniel made a strangled sound beside her. "Eleanor, wait," Naomi cautioned, though her own heart raced with fear for her friend. "We need to be strategic." Harlow turned at Watts' shout. "Found this one trying to use the back door, boss. Thought you might want to make an example." "Bring her here," Harlow commanded, his voice carrying across the silent street. As Watts pushed Eleanor forward, Naomi caught Samuel's eye across the distance and gave a slight nod. She raised her rifle, took careful aim at Harlow, and fired. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. In the next instant, the street erupted in gunfire as Samuel and his men opened fire from their positions. Naomi and Daniel advanced, using the buildings for cover as they fired at Harlow's men. Two fell immediately while others scrambled for protection. Watts, panicking, released Eleanor, who ran toward the nearest doorway. In the confusion, Harlow recovered enough to draw his pistol, firing wildly toward the church where he'd seen the initial shot come from. Naomi ducked behind a water barrel, returning fire deliberately. The gunfight seemed to last an eternity but was over in minutes. When the smoke cleared, 3 of Harlow's men lay dead in the street. Another was wounded, hands raised in surrender. Watts was pinned down behind the bank steps by Samuel's steady rifle. Only Harlow remained dangerous, crouched behind a trough, blood staining his duster but his gun hand steady. "Might as well give up, Harlow," Naomi called. "Your men are finished." His laugh was ugly. A woman playing sheriff. "This territory's gone to hell. Drop your weapon and stand up slowly. I don't take orders from women." Harlow's voice dripped contempt, especially not one who's about to die. He lunged from behind the trough, firing rapidly. Naomi felt the burn as a bullet grazed her arm, but her own aim was true. Harlow staggered as her shot hit him in the chest, falling to his knees in the dusty street. Even wounded, he tried to raise his gun one final time. A shot rang out from the hotel balcony, and Harlow collapsed face down in the dirt. In the silence that followed, Naomi emerged from cover. Arm bleeding but her grip on her revolver steady as she approached Watts, who had dropped his weapon at the sight of his fallen leader. "Charlie Watts, you're under arrest for robbery, assault, and conspiracy to murder," she announced, her voice carrying across the stunned street. "Anyone else want to argue with the law in Leavenworth?" The surviving outlaws offered no resistance as Daniel and Samuel's men disarmed them and marched them to the jail. Townspeople began emerging from buildings, murmuring in amazement at the scene and at the woman with a star who stood at its center, Dr. Morris, who had returned to town ahead of them, treated Naomi's wound at the sheriff's office, tusking over what he called her reckless bravery while Eleanor Walsh brought hot coffee and bandages. "The whole town's talking about you," Eleanor said, her bruised face unable to hide her smile. "Sheriff Zeller, the woman who took down Jeb Harlow." "It wasn't just me," Naomi protested. "Samuel, Daniel, all of you, but you let us," Samuel said from the doorway. He'd been helping secure the prisoners and organizing a burial detail for the dead outlaws. "You gave this town back its courage." That evening, as lanterns illuminated Leavenworth's Main Street, the mayor organized an impromptu town meeting outside the sheriff's office. Standing on a hastily constructed platform, he addressed the gathered citizens. "Today, our town faced evil and prevailed, thanks to the extraordinary courage of acting Sheriff Naomi Zeller." He turned to where Naomi stood beside Samuel. "Miss Zeller, I believe I speak for everyone when I say we would be honored if you would remove the acting from your title and serve as our permanent sheriff." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Naomi, overwhelmed, stepped forward. "I'm grateful for your confidence, Mayor Whitfield, but I accepted this position as a temporary measure. Leavenworth needs a sheriff with experience. We need someone with heart," Samuel interrupted, stepping beside her. "Someone who sees what needs doing and does it, regardless of convention or fear." Their eyes met, and in his, Naomi saw something that made her heart beat faster. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "I could continue until a suitable replacement is found." More cheers greeted this compromise, and as the meeting dissolved into celebration, Samuel drew Naomi away from the crowd, leading her toward the quieter end of the street. "You were magnificent today," he said softly. "Reminded me of those Mustangs, wild but purposeful." Naomi smiled despite the throbbing in her arm. "They're wild like me." Samuel's laugh was warm as he reached for her hand. "They're wild like me," he corrected. "Untamed, unpredictable, refusing to be anything but what they are." "Is that so bad?" she asked. "Not bad at all." His fingers tightened around hers. "But challenging." Naomi stepped closer, her smile widening. "Then I'll tame you all together, you and those Mustangs of yours." The surprise in his eyes gave way to something deeper. "You think you can tame me, Sheriff Zeller?" "I think," she murmured, "that like those horses, you don't need taming so much as understanding." She reached up, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "And I understand you very well, Samuel Stone." In the gathering dusk of Leavenworth's Main Street, with the sounds of celebration in the background, Samuel bent his head and kissed her a kiss that spoke of wildness and promise, of futures neither had imagined until that moment. 6 months later, Naomi stood on the porch of the Stone Ranch house, watching as Samuel worked with the black mare in the corral, the same spirited horse that had caught her attention on her first visit. The mare no longer paced nervously, but moved in harmony with Samuel's commands, proud and dignified even in cooperation. Much had changed in those months. Naomi had indeed continued as sheriff, until the territorial governor appointed a permanent replacement, a former Army captain, who proved both competent and respectful of the foundations she had laid. Leavenworth had flourished in the absence of Harlow's shadow, with new businesses opening and homesteaders feeling secure in their claims. And Naomi had married Samuel in a simple ceremony at the Leavenworth church, exchanging the sheriff's star for a gold band and a life that combined the best of both their worlds. "She's ready," Samuel called, looking up at Naomi with pride as the mare responded to a complex command. "I knew she would be," Naomi replied, descending the steps to join him at the corral. "She just needed someone who understood her nature." Samuel opened the gate, letting Naomi enter. The mare, once so wary, approached cautiously but without fear, allowing Naomi to stroke her sleek neck. "Like someone else I know," Samuel murmured, slipping an arm around his wife's waist. "Wild but willing to trust when it's earned." Naomi leaned against him, watching as the other Mustangs, now all trained and responsive, grazed peacefully in the adjacent pasture. In the distance, the Kansas prairie stretched to the horizon, as boundless and full of possibility as their future together. "I never thought I'd find this," she admitted softly. "A place where being myself, all of myself, would be not just accepted but valued." Samuel turned her in his arms, his eyes reflecting the sunset. "I never thought I'd find someone who could match me, wildness for wildness, strength for strength." "We tamed each other, I think," Naomi said, smiling. "No," Samuel shook his head, "we freed each other." As twilight settled over the Stone Ranch, Naomi and Samuel walked hand in hand toward the house they had built together, a home for two spirits that had found in each other not constraint but liberation, not domestication but partnership. Behind them, the black mare watched their retreat, her wild heart now beating in rhythm with the humans who had earned her trust not through dominance, but through respect. And in that moment, under the vast Kansas sky, both woman and Mustang knew the truth that the greatest freedom comes not from remaining untamed and alone, but from choosing to run wild alongside those who love you exactly as you are.